Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh.
My name is Sam, and I am a beach bum. More on the beach than the bum side,
Sure.
but
You
I like it.
You like going to the beach.
I like it when my bum is on the beach.
I don't think that's what the bum means in beach bum, but we can roll with that. Which beach are you at today?
I am at St. Joe State Park, and if you know where that is, then you really know Florida.
Yeah.
I came a little bit north to escape all of the destruction from the hurricane and just to kind of get my brain about me because we've been doing disaster relief for weeks, and I'm like, I'm going to go breathe. So I'm breathing with my bum on the beach.
Well, I'm happy for you.
And you voted, for those of you who are listening and can't see. If you're watching on YouTube, then you can. Josh obviously did some early voting at the time of this recording.
I did.
I believe.
My staff.
I believe by the time this airs, we will know who the next president is. Will it be Josh? Will it be the person you voted for?
100,000% no. It absolutely will not be the person I voted for. I will put my hand on a Bible and swear to that right now. It is not going to be the person I voted for. But, you need to vote your conscience and fulfill your duties if that's your conscience to do so. So I did it. I am standing by my vote. And I also, it was kind of fun. I walked around the office. I was like, who wants to go to vote? And so several hadn't voted yet. We all live in the same county. And so you don't have to go to your polling place. And so it was kind of fun. We all went off and voted, took a picture, had a great time.
Good deal. Yeah, the person that I vote for, which I will be voting Saturday, a little early, will win. And of that, I am convinced. So there you go.
Good. Congratulations. Congratulations.
All right. So we've got a really good topic today. And actually, this is, think of this episode as part 1, part 2.
You got a two-parter.
It is a bit of a 2-part episode. The first is going to this episode is going to focus on Josh in 90 days. Kind of 90 days in. What have you learned? You've been at the church longer than 90 days, but
a little bit.
The 90-day mark. What should you be doing if you've made a transition? And then I'm 9 years in at my church, and so next episode we're going to talk about what I've learned. Josh learns the easy way. I learn the hard way, and that's going to be it in a nutshell. But before we jump into the episode, thank you, church teams, for all that you do to sponsor this episode. They will be moving with us. Church teams will be moving with us over to Rainer on Leadership. So if you have not gotten that announcement yet, this conversation between Josh and me will be moving over to Rainer on Leadership. So we're pausing EST for a season. Might pop back over here at some point, but for now we're going to move the conversation to Rainer on Leadership. So don't unsubscribe to EST, but please go subscribe to Rainer on Leadership, and that's where church teams will be. That's where we will be. We're actually going to be doing a lot of good stuff over at Rainer on Leadership, kind of combining forces with everyone over there. And we want to say thank you to church teams for sponsoring and to continue to sponsor. Go check them out at churchteams.com. They have a software solution for you. Small church, big church, doesn't matter. They do it all. Scalable system, price points to match your church. Love what they do. So go give them a look at churchteams.com.
Yeah. So I looked at
Josh.
I looked at my Bible reading app, and since I started here on January 1st, I looked at my Bible reading app to find out that we are on the 297th day of my Bible reading through the year. So I've been at this church for 297 days. It's the length of this through the Bible thing as well. So we're going to talk about what are some of the things you learn in your first little stint at your new church.
We say 90 days as a kind of just a way to catch you with the title, right. But let's just say that first season, 90 days, 180 days, first year, whatever. It's kind of different for every church, but what's the big takeaway? So you've made transitions before, as have I, but we're a little older now, a little more, slightly more mature in our leadership. What
Yep.
what did you learn?
Yeah, a number of things, and I would say I'm very much doing this one differently than I did the other two. This is my third lead pastorate. I think it's like my sixth or seventh church position. So the first thing I would do is you got to fight to slow it down. You have to slow it down, and I know we talk about rest a lot. We talk about rhythms and pace, those sort of things. We've talked about it on the show repeatedly, and I'm just telling you, until you go ahead and do this, until you go ahead and rest, until you go ahead and take the Sabbath, until you go ahead and slow things down, you will just continue to sort of have some of those same anxieties or struggles or the pressures that you're having. So, one of the things that I am learning, and the way that I would frame this is in my first two pastorates, I did not fight to slow this season down. And this one I am. And I am noticing a tremendous difference in my stress level, in productivity, in what I'm accomplishing, and just a overall feeling of solidity in the work that I'm doing. So you have to fight to slow it down, and that's how I learned it, by not doing it twice and then now doing it and finding some great results.
There is change management theory that was championed by John Cotter in a book called Leading Change. I think it came out in the 90s, and it's a good book. I mean, there's a lot of good there. I'm about to critique it, but overall, it's a very, very helpful book.
Yeah.
He's sold a few more copies of his book than I've sold of mine. So who am I to critique?
Right.
But
Yeah.
he talks about creating a crisis in order to enact change. And while that may be okay in certain settings, in the established church setting, that can really backfire on you, especially if you're new and you are entering into what is perceived to be a fairly stable situation. You go around starting fires and you're going to get burned. So I would just say this is really good advice. The temptation is to charge forward. A lot of change management theory will tell you that. Do a lot in your first 90 days. And you know what? If your church is in a crisis situation, then yes. But if your church is not in a crisis situation, good grief, slow it down. Don't kill yourself and don't get yourself fired.
Yeah, there's two thoughts. I think within the 90 days, I think you should be able to, within the first 90 days, articulate some changes that you are about to endeavor on. I don't think you should get to halfway through the year or whatever, and you're like, yeah, I still don't know what we're going to do. I think you need to go ahead and articulate that within 90 days. I don't think you should enact those changes quite yet unless there is some sort of very pressing crisis. I would say this church that I took is in a crisis. It does need substantial change. They knew that. They agreed to that. There's not a person in this church that does not affirm that and does not affirm that I'm the person to come and make those changes. However, I still think it is best to slow this down. The other aspect to that I would put, we've talked several times on the show about vocation versus the calling. And churches, you have a relationship with the church. The church as a whole, you have this relationship with her and her personality and her culture. Just like any relationship, if they start off very hot and heavy, they almost always flame out. And so keep that in mind, that you as a pastor, as a leader, you have a relationship with this church. And so start intentional, guarding your heart. If you want to talk all this dating relationship, guarding your heart.
Don't be so hot and heavy with your church in a relationship. I am poking fun at your language, but you are correct. You are correct.
I mean, I'm actually being pun intended is what I'm trying to say here. If you go so hot and heavy, it will burn down. So slow it down. You got to fight for that. Nobody else is going to let you slow down. You have to be intentional and slow it down.
And that's key. You're the one setting the pace.
Right.
As the leader, you're the one dictating pace. And if you're getting a lot of pushback on pace, then you might want to reconsider, because you can only take people so far so fast. Yeah. And if they won't go, they won't go. So while change is important, and the first 90 days are important, slowing down is something that you don't often hear from people, but I think it's something we should do more. Yeah. Now, this next one, I like what you're doing here. You're talking about the emphasis on learning and asking questions. So when you say, hey, slow it down and point two, ask more questions, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, you just don't know what you don't know. And you need to go on a fact finding investigation. You need to try to figure out as best you can sort of the current health, the current culture of the church. And so ask some questions. One of the ways to do that is I've just set up just a series of meetings with people. And you got to be really kind of winsome and lighthearted. You're not in trouble. The pastor doesn't want to meet with you. The new pastor isn't calling you into his office. But I'd sit down and I was like, hey, here's how this works. I have some questions, but if you have questions, I want to answer any questions you have. Usually they say, no, I don't have any questions. Then I say, great. Here's my questions. How did you get to our town? How did you get to this church? And obviously, this church has struggled. What do you think caused that struggle, and how would you turn it around? So that's the three things that I ask, and you find out all kinds of great things about how they moved to the city and those kind of things, or they grew up here. What drew them to the church in the first place? Why did they come to this church? And so 30 years ago, what was drawing a lot of people here? 10 years ago, 5 years ago? And then what is their perspective? And what I found very quickly was, man, it wasn't 10, 11 people. It was 20, 30, 50 couples are telling me essentially the same. This is what caused our decline. And I'm not real sure what will change that. So just getting at some of that causal stuff, finding those questions. There's other things like know your community reports, just the statistics on what's around in the community, what's going on in other churches. Things like when this church was built, where it was built, there were no other houses out here. And you can kind of line up the development of my city and the peak and decline of my church. You can see some of that. And so if you know that, you can help people understand why the church peaked when it did, and then some of the factors and why it would regress. And so ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. That's going to help.
Yeah, if you're interested in the Know Your Community report, it can be found at knowyourcommunity.com. So
That's right.
Go check it out there. One question that I like to ask, not just when I'm new, but just about any time, is what do you love most about this church? Mm-hmm. If I'm doing a consultation, even in my own church sometimes, that's next episode, 9 years in, what have I learned? Mm-hmm, but what do you love most? And, just by asking that one benign question, it's a very safe question to ask. It's a positive question. Mm-hmm. You will learn a lot by what they say and what they don't say. And I love the idea of, why are you here? What got you to the church? Because when I started asking that question at West Bradenton early on, it was, the preschool. Well, we did away with the preschool years before I got there. Guess what happened?
Decline.
Young families stopped coming.
Yeah.
That's why we were an older church. So we formed a partnership to bring a preschool back to the church. Guess what? We've got a lot of young families again. So, it's just things like that are pretty basic that you can learn a lot just by asking questions and can create a vision and a strategy through those questions.
Yeah. Before you get to the here's what we're going to do, ask a ton of where y'all been? What does it feel like? That kind of thing. I would also add this to the question idea. I've started to develop a little habit in my life to where anytime I'm put in a situation in which I'm supposed to know answers, I ask two questions first. So anytime somebody stops me, hey, Pastor, I just need to know what you're thinking about such and such. Or, hey, Pastor, what's your vision on this or that? Or you're at a finance team meeting and the whole table turns and looks at you and go, what do you want to do? My habit now is to ask two questions first. And I don't have specific questions. They usually tend to be, well, what do you think about it? Or tell me more. What exactly are you trying to get at? So that's a thing to really, just remind you to ask more questions in every situation.
All right, so next you talk about prioritizing problems. So slow down, ask more questions, and begin to prioritize problems. How do you do that?
Yeah, I would call that, another way to say that is just triage. So there are going to be, when you start to pile up problems, get away, maybe an afternoon or a day, and you're taking notes throughout all these questions you've been asking for 90 days. sit down and try to categorize them. I very quickly discovered 4 categories of issues that most everything everybody expressed to me fit into. Those 4 categories became our what we call the Next Hill plan. And what helps with that is those 4 categories do not encompass every problem at this church. I could probably come up with 10 categories of things to deal with, but those 4 need to be fixed soon, very soon. So a perfect example of this is the other day, Jackie and I were getting around in the morning, and she said something along the lines, you know what we need to work on at the church? And she had this idea, and it was a great idea, very insightful. And I said, I agree with you. I think that's something that needs working on. Right now, we're working on the Next Hill plan. And she started laughing because she knows that's my sort of canned answer to everybody that comes up to me with
Gave
things.
it to your wife.
I did. And she started laughing. I said, I agree with you. I see that. It's on my list. But right now, we're working on the Next Hill plan. And so anyways, I got just a marker board like Sam does in his office. His is chalk. Mine's marker. And anytime I have just a random thought run through my brain that isn't encompassed in the Next Hill, I just come in and write it on the board, and I'll get to it later. It'll form some sort of categories that might be the next hill that we're going to climb. So, yeah.
You also talk about relationships being valued over systems. Mm-hmm. And I think, some pastors do this very naturally. Mm-hmm. Like they are more relationally driven. Some, like me, and I'm an extrovert, but I'm also task driven. So while I enjoy being around people, I call myself a work extrovert. So I love collaboration and work and getting things done, and I love working through people and with people, and leading people. Yeah. I'm not a socialite. I'm not. You can invite me to your party. I'll have a good time, no problem. But I'll be thinking about what I need to do. And I think that this is something that even if you're like me, an extrovert and you love people, but you're a work extrovert, this is where I think you can kind of, I hate to say temper your own personality, but kind of need to place a greater value on the relationship over the system. So flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like with any other job. You're hired to do a job, and there are systems that are involved in that job. And as sad as it is, most pastor search committees or churches, they don't really express the relational needs of the church. They're going to talk about things like, well, pastor, our finances are in the gutter. Can you come in and help us with our finances? We have a lot of deferred maintenance, or we just haven't done any programs that are reaching out to the community. So they'll say things like that, or we've got this massive downtown structure with a bunch of tenants in it, and we have mismanaged it for years. Can you come in and try to fix that for us? They'll say things like that in the interview process. So when you get on the ground, that's what you're doing. That's kind of how you got the job, because you have a plan for those things. So those things can dominate, but what you've got to remind yourself of is the church is a relationship. So you got to value this sort of stuff. And I'm not the same wiring as Sam, obviously. I'm not as you. I'm an introvert. So relationships, I like them. I'm a relational person. But I only need like one, and that's Jackie. And then I'm fine. I don't need many relationships, but I just kind of want to talk to her, talk to my friends, that kind of stuff. So I can be very drained at the end of a day, or at the end of several committee meetings and those sort of stuff. So what I had to do, since I am a systemic person, I'm very much spreadsheets and charts, and I am an introvert, I just started making myself spreadsheets and charts on the relationships that I need to really invest in. And it kept me on track. Okay, here's the 60 couples that I need to meet with. And I'm going to meet with 2 or 3 a week, or otherwise I'll just flame out. The other thing is, like with an introvert, when I'm sitting in long committee meetings, I start to get very on edge, and I feel myself getting frustrated with these things. And there are several times in those types of long meetings that I just tell Josh, they're just people. Just love these people. Right now, you just get an opportunity for this 6 people to just hang out with them. And so, yeah, we're going to do this budget or whatever, but they're just people. So that's where, even when you're in the midst of the system always has people. So focus on that people that's sitting there. So I've started doing things like bringing sweet tea to my finance team meeting. I've started like just making sure that there's some sort of prayer request in my mind with these people. It's like, yeah, great, we could talk about the budget, but first, how's your daughter doing? Those sort of things are helping me just, we're going to do the system, but invest in the relationship while we're working the system. That's going to help a lot.
Couple things here. One, sweet tea is disgusting. And two, if you put your relationships in a spreadsheet, I'm assuming I'm like I know Jackie's A1, maybe I'm A2. I hope I'm not like Q143. If that's my box, that means I'm way down the priority list. I don't want to know. I don't know
I have a
what box I'm
standing
in.
SAM meeting twice a month, and so I don't even have to. This is our system, and so that's even a funny way to kind of bring up Sam and I record twice a month. It's systematic, it's planned, it's in a calendar. However, before show and after show, we catch up with one another, and so there is relational aspect. You can do the same thing with your standing finance team meeting. You can do the same thing with your monthly deacons meeting. Don't just look at it at like, this is my work brain, I've got my work hat on. Look at it like all these people have fun stories, history, challenges, prayer requests, things that they care much more about doing than being in this meeting. So just find that stuff out and you'll get through it.
Good word. All right, last one. And this is the one that was most curious to me, so we saved the best for last. You say that there are 2 sides to every story.
There really are.
First 90 days, 2 sides to every story. What do you mean by that?
Oh, man. It's no secret. Our church went through 2 pastor search teams. The one that found me was the second team. The first team brought a candidate that failed the vote, and it was traumatizing to our church. It was a very hard experience. But I always tell people, I am not here to litigate who was right and who was wrong in those situations. What I am here to do is mitigate the damage that was done. And so I've met with people. That's one story. There are many stories. Anytime you take an established church, there will be many skeletons in the closet, many situations that they talk about, like that one Wednesday night, or that one vote, or the letting go of that one person. Or it might be COVID. And it's not necessarily just COVID. It might be the way we responded, or when we shut down or didn't shut down, or how long we shut down. And they'll talk about that stuff. One of the challenges is trying to keep yourself out of the litigation position. It is not your job to declare who was right or wrong in those circumstances. You weren't there. You don't know. And you're only hearing who's left. And as we know, the victor writes the story, or the survivor at least. I heard somebody say the other day that Winston Churchill said that history is going to be very kind to him because he's going to write it. And so you got to remember that the people that are left in your church, they have a certain perspective over the people who left the church. So what I just try to do is listen, challenge people to think differently, challenge people to forgive and let go of things. Another big one that you're going to face is just your predecessor. And there in that first season, everything you do is so awesome, and everything they did was not quite as good as you're doing it.
Or the opposite.
Or
everything you're doing is terrible,
yes,
and your predecessor was amazing.
Right. And you just got to learn to let it roll off your back. In fact, I was hanging out with my predecessor just a couple weeks ago, and we actually started laughing about it. And I was like, look, I know they love me right now, but they'll hate me in a few years. Just, it happens. And they're going to say nice things about you and mean things about me and the reverse. And both of us just started laughing, and we're like, yeah, it's just the way it is. So there are 2 sides to every story. And unless you've heard both sides, but what I'm kind of saying is, even after you've heard both sides, it's not your job to declare who was right or wrong. Christ will take care of that. You just need to navigate it. And so, man, I guess what I'm trying to say is don't join a team. You are team the health of the entire church, not team whatever happened and who's there. Just stay above that fray.
Good word. And I think that's about all the time that we have for today's episode. Again, thank you, church teams, for all that you do to sponsor this episode. Thank you, church teams, for moving with us over to Rainer on Leadership. So again, if you have not had a chance to subscribe to Rainer on Leadership, go over there, start listening. Josh and I will be there soon. I'm already there, but Josh and I will be there soon. You don't have to unsubscribe here, but we definitely want you to carry this conversation over there. And we'll see you in the next episode. We're going to be talking about 9 years in, which is more my story, and what I've learned. So we'll see you next week.
See ya.